Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about should the government balance its budget. Firstly, I want to talk about this question. Government budgets should always be balanced. Although the United States has been running a budget deficit for years, that doesn't mean it will be continue indefinitely. In the future, a future generation will have to shoulder the burden of higher tax and interest rates. Before the long-term effects become unmanageable, the government must replace its budget. I understand that if the government needs to always balance its budget, then it will have to cut spending. A reduction in transfer payments can hurt the poor, who are the most vulnerable during a recession. However, if the government is indebted, it spends more on interest than on public programs and services. Maintaining balance on budget will enable the government to allocate funds in accordance with different sectors' priorities. Investing more in programs that will help boost the economy will enable them to create jobs and lower unemployment rate, reducing the burden of transfer payments. There is a quote by Tyler Caldwell: "A national budget must be balanced, the public debt must be reduced, the arrogance of the authorities must be moderate and controlled. Payments to foreign governments must be reduced. If the nation doesn't want to bankrupt, people must again learn to work instead of living on public assistance." Firstly, I want to talk about what's the budget. In order for the government to meet the goals of economic and social growth, it must implement a number of policies. The government must spend a lot of money on defense, administrations, development, welfare projects, and other relief operations to implement these policies. In order to generate enough revenue to meet the mounting expenditures, it's most important to explore all available funding sources. I want to talk more about budgets. Budgets are among the most important government documents. Like a company's annual report, the government budget is part of its finances. The government budget lays out the government's financial performance. In the second part of the budget, the government outlines its financial part for the period leading up to the next budget. How does government use their budget? Governments with an expansive fiscal policy boost the economy through higher output. Tax cuts and increased government spending are the main components of this budgetary policy. Governments may choose uh, constructionary policies to prevent inflation and slow down the economy. And I want to talk about how does government use their budget more. Like budgets present community civic process, project revenues and costs, and future plans for what revenues will pay for what departmental services and who will benefit from them. In the public sector, budget development goes beyond just number crunching. It's part of strategy plan that's developed by considering the needs and priorities of all stakeholders. From government officials to employees to citizens and business leaders, public agencies must develop, approve, and implement their budgets. Budget. Balanced government budget. The concept of balanced budget refers to the situation where total expected revenues equal to total planned expenditures in financial planning or budgeting. Government budgeting is the most common application of this concept. It's also possible to consider a budget to be balanced after releasing and recording a full year's worth of revenues and expenses. The fiscal policy of expansionary government stimulates the economy by raising the level of output. These fiscal policies fall into increasing government spending and cutting taxes. A government may want to implement contractionary policies to avoid inflation and slow down the economy. A balanced budget is commonly used to describe official government's budgets. The government might announce that it has a uh, it has a balanced budget for the next fiscal years, or policies might campaign on promise of balancing the budget once in office. Balanced budgets are often associated with surplus in budget. The surplus represents the difference between revenues and expenses in a budget. Surpluses can be reinvested back into business, For example, for research and development, they can be paid out to employees in a form of bonuses, or they can be distributed or shareholders as dividends. And now we will talk about 3-2-1 style. Three things I learned. Firstly, I learned governments shouldn't run budget surpluses unless they are offset by trade surpluses. Secondly, I learned government revenue comes from income tax, corporate tax, social insurance taxes, and consumption tax for corporation and non-governmental organizations. Finally, the fundamental purpose of balanced budget is to ensure that revenues equal expenditures, which means that there is neither a deficit nor a surplus. Now, two things I would apply to my life. To help my government balance its budget, I would always pay my taxes and bills on time. The second things I would like to do in the future is to budget more. The cost of almost everything product goes up, so we need to learn to budget. Finally, one thing is I would learn more. I would learn about personal budgets more because an individual or family can utilize this to plan and manage their finances over the short and long term. This is my reference. Thanks for attention.